so many people jumping online with us, and thank you again for supporting these monthly webinars. Hopefully, you're getting lots of value from them. The feedback we get is always very welcome, and it motivates us to keep doing them and keep looking for topics of interest to provide a little bit of education and try and demystify some of the more complex stuff that goes on in the financial world. So I'm hosting today. Nick's presenting, so I get the comfortable seat. He's in the hot seat for this afternoon, and it's probably timely, the topic that we are diving into this afternoon. We're looking at a topic called investment bonds, or as they have sometimes in the past been called, insurance bonds. And these are not new vehicles. They've actually been around a long, long time, and in many respects they even predate the superannuation system. But definitely, as super gained steam during the 1990s and 2000s, they fell by the wayside. Weren't nearly as popular as superannuation, but some recent changes are bringing them back into the spotlight again. So we've had additional taxes applied for superannuation funds, particularly members with larger balances. That has interested a few people in looking at investment bonds. And then we had a fairly, I'm not sure if we should call it good or bad, probably more bad than good, but an interesting budget rolled out in May this year. And some of the changes coming through there in relation to capital gains tax, and potentially down the track a little bit, we're still waiting on details, of course, but changes to family trusts. And both of those events are likely to trigger, again, further interest in investment bonds or insurance bonds. So it is a timely topic to be looking at right now, and I won't steal all of Nick's thunder. I'm going to throw it across to him, and he can start to demystify what these old vehicles are and why maybe we should be rethinking them as part of the future. Thanks, Nick.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard. Welcome, everybody. Just bear with me while I get some slides here, and I will run through a little bit of a presentation, but it is. Oh, there we go. I'm running things absolutely perfectly. I've already hit. Oh no, here we are. All right. Fingers crossed. Hey, there we go. Whew. I'm going to start sweating there for a second. As Richard said, tonight's topic is on investment bonds, also called insurance bonds. And I know there are a couple of attendees tonight that already have investment bonds. So thanks for coming along. Would be interested, now that you've had those investment bonds running for a little while, if you have any opinion on them now that they are up and running. But they're very good as a tool in the toolbox, and of course, like all tools in the toolbox, you use the right tool for the right job. And where you have them absolutely perfectly aligned, I think they're pretty hard to go past. So quite often, from our perspective, we will look at a range of different investment options for you, and superannuation is a bit of a no-brainer. I think, Richard, would be the right way to call it, because it's great for tax. The limits are very, very high. They're changing rules and the like. It's not a perfect vehicle, but it's a great default vehicle. But where a situation can become even slightly more complex because of estate issues, because of long-term saving issues, because of tax issues, an investment bond really comes into its own. So we've only got a few slides to go through tonight, and really keen, if anyone has any, some questions, please let us know as we're going, just in that chat area on the right-hand side, or depending on your device, I think it might even be underneath the video, depending on what sort of device that you're watching on. But an investment bond, just to give a little bit of a description as to what they are, they're a managed fund that are inside a life insurance policy. I think it's probably the easiest way to describe them. And they're kind of different. They're a little bit like superannuation, which also, has some superannuation has investments. Superannuation has taxes, and superannuation also has beneficiaries. And so an investment bond is very similar to that. However, it's a little bit different in the sense of the amount of control that you can have. And as time goes on and the products get more popular, or repopular anyway, over the last sort of 5 or so years, there are companies out there that are making them with a whole kind of derivatives that really make them quite attractive. So we're not going to go into any of those derivatives tonight. I'm just going to try and stick to the knitting to give you a really good idea as to what investment bonds are. And some of the main key areas, really just 3 key areas why you would consider using one. But again, when it comes to overall what an investment bond is, how they work, very straightforward. You put money into it, you choose how it gets invested. The investment company, or as I've got written here, the life company, they grow it. So they, in the investments that you choose, you can have a wide range of different investments, very much like your superannuation. You can have, share funds, you can have, well, you name it. You can have all sorts of weird and wonderful investments in there. But the investments, then they grow. It is a tax-paid fund, so we'll talk a little bit more on that as we go through. But it's internally taxed at a maximum tax rate of 30%. So it's really important as to exactly what you do invest in there to try and mitigate that tax rate. Superannuation, of course, is taxed at a maximum rate of 15%. And then after 10 years, after you completed the full 10 years, every dollar that you withdraw is tax-free to you. Now, it's already tax-paid within the investment bond, just like superannuation is. But importantly, just like superannuation, when you turn it into a pension, that money comes out to you tax-free. So they become quite attractive from a long-term investment vehicle. Now, just to clarify a couple of things, an investment bond is not an investment in its own right. So it's not a bond such as you hear them talk about on the nightly news. It's not a bond like we talk about in our 3 tanks of time-based risk, where we have the second tank, which is full of fixed interest investments, which we may go on and talk about that they're bonds. So they're different kind of bonds. Those ones are like, a bond like that is like a term deposit. It's an investment that you loan money to somebody else effectively. So this is an investment bond, a very similar name, if not an identical name, but it's an insurance bond. So the big thing about it is that it does sit outside of superannuation. There really aren't any contribution caps, which is quite handy depending on how much you want to use the tool. The tax is paid for you, and of course, really importantly, you can choose your beneficiaries. So you don't really have a limit on who that beneficiary is. So with superannuation, it needs to be a dependent. With an investment bond or an insurance policy like these, they do need to be a real person. However, it can be anybody that you like. So there's a few key details that I think you should be really aware of, and the first 2 are the critical ones, and they're really quite different than anything else. So you have something called the 10-year rule, and I hinted about that on the previous page, where after 10 years, everything that you've got in there comes out tax-free. So there's no further tax to pay on it. There's been tax paid on it and internally inside the bond. So if it's grown and your account balance sitting in there is $50,000 and you want to take that out after 10 years, there's no tax to pay on it. So there's no capital gains tax. There's no income tax. It just comes to you. So like Richard was saying there before, some of the changes that came into the introduced in the budget this year, which said that on capital gains, if you've got some shares, and after a period of time, 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, you want to sell those shares, regardless of what your income is, you will pay a minimum 30% capital gains tax on the gain itself. So that's something that you won't have with an investment bond. So as a long-term investment, obviously that 10-year rule becomes quite attractive. The second rule is something called the 125% rule. Now, it's one of those rules, I think, that the less you think about it, the easier it is to understand it. The more you think about it, the more it does, does some loops. But it effectively means that if you put $100 in this year, next year, you can't put in any more than $125. And then the year after that, it sort of grows by 125%. So it's if you stop putting any money in, you actually can't put any more money in after that. Now, that one there is just purely to try and maintain the 10-year tax rule. If you do, in year 4, you don't put any contributions in, but then in year 5, you restart your contributions, you can still do it. It's just that the 10-year rule will reset. So, it's again, it's not a perfect product, but it's a product I think that can, when I come to some of the reasons why you would use one of these, I think you'll see that apart from some of those little idiosyncrasies about it, they are actually a fantastic vehicle to look at. Now, if you withdraw your money before the 10 years, you do have to pay some tax on those withdrawals. So you do need to be careful. Now, it's a little bit of complexity comes into this. If you take it out in the first 8 years, or the first 7 years, I should say, you basically pay tax on any of the gain and the income and the like that's in there that comes out. You'll have to pay tax at your marginal tax rate. If you take it out in year 8, 9, or 10, it comes with a tax offset to try and offset any of that tax that you've got. But then after 10 years, it's tax-free. So you do have that issue with an early withdrawal that you do need to be aware of. A couple of little things here. It does sit outside of superannuation. So they are very, very different to superannuation. There's no tax paperwork that you need to worry about. So when you do your taxes, you don't need to worry about any of this. It all gets done for you. It's the same as your superannuation in that sense. So if you've got an investment in superannuation and you go to do your taxes, you don't need to worry about the taxes involved with super. And when it comes to your investment bonds, your insurance bonds, they don't need to be included either. And then, of course, the last one on this page is your beneficiary nominations. So with any insurance policy, you have a lot of control over who gets the money. So if you want to invest on behalf of your grandkids and make sure that at some stage in the future, your grandkids will receive a particular amount of money, or for that matter, you want to leave some money to a nephew or to a particular little bit more money to a particular child, you can do that. You maintain a tremendous amount of control with these investments. So there are probably 3 main reasons that we think that you would use an insurance bond or an investment bond. And there's a bunch of derivatives on these 3 where you could actually get involved and, try and make them a lot more complex than what I've got them here. And so I'm just going to stick to, I'm not going to get into all those complications. If you are interested to find out what those complications are, just have a chat with your advisor and we'll be happy to explain it. But the 3 that I've got on here is, if you're wanting to do some long-term investing outside of super, there's some advantages to it. Obviously, you've got contribution caps to superannuation and people do actually hit that. You do have some issues with taking money out of super early. So, if you haven't reached a preservation age yet, or for that matter, you're trying to control who the beneficiaries are, keeping it outside of super is actually not a bad idea. You can fund a grandchild's education is something that I've got here. When you want to save for a grandchild's education, if you invest something in your name, you need to pay the tax on it at a marginal tax rate, and including a capital gains tax. So if you have a grandchild that's born today and you go, look, for the next 18 years, I would like to invest some money. In 18 years' time, if you've invested that in your own name, even if it was as trustee for your grandchild, when that transfers, it can be seen as a capital gains tax event. So you do need to be quite careful of doing that. But in an investment bond, that doesn't happen. And with estate planning, insurance bonds or investment bonds have a beneficiary on them, like I mentioned before, and you retain so much control over who gets that money. So with a life insurance contract, a beneficiary is effectively the same as assigning ownership of the policy to somebody else. So with superannuation, it's very different. When you nominate a beneficiary under superannuation, at its weakest, you're just expressing a wish to the trustee that they will pay your benefit to the person that you want them to pay it to. There are some tighter ones there where I think it's, you're pretty much assured that it will go to the right beneficiary, but it can still be contested. And it's the same thing with leaving money in a will. They can still be contested. Estate planning, when it comes to an investment bond, because it's an investment within a life insurance policy, it is uncontestable. It's just something that goes straight to that beneficiary. It's very, very, very good, very, very safe. So I'd like to run through in a bit of detail, just a case study of each of those three. So the first one is some long-term investing. Now, Robert here, a retired civil engineer. Now, I'll just highlight, whilst all of these numbers and everything are correct, Robert is not a real person. And that photo there is not a real person either. That's all put together by AI. It's a little bit scary how well AI can do that sort of stuff, but I'm not breaching anybody's privacy here, although all the numbers are correct. So Robert, the retired civil engineer from Brizzy, has 200 grand in term deposit. He's not earning the interest that he's after. He does have other income that comes in, so he is taxed every year at his marginal rate. It's not the greatest situation. He can't get any more money into superannuation. So what he does is he puts 200,000 into an investment bond. He just puts it into a balanced fund, 70% in shares and property and 30% into bonds and fixed interest and cash. And the insurance bond pays the tax ongoing at a maximum rate of 30%. So nothing appears in his tax return. So effectively, he puts this $200,000 in and he forgets about it. Probably not literally, but he does. There's no ongoing administration of it that's needed. So casting forward a little bit after 10 years, if he's received a 7% average annual return, that 200,000 has then grown, just like it would anywhere, to very close to $400,000. Now he can take that out without any further tax to pay. It's completely tax-free after that 10-year period. And it's from an investment perspective, it's completely different to the term deposit. But investing it in the investment bond rather than in his own name has created an area where he doesn't need to worry about capital gains tax. He hasn't needed to worry about adding any extra money onto his tax return, or for that matter, getting stressed about any addition to his marginal tax rate. So kind of a unique situation for someone like Robert here, the retired civil engineer. But these situations people are in, and from a long-term investing perspective, it's a great way just to keep things simple. You don't have to start with $200,000. You can start with $5,000. They can be quite relatively small amounts. Now, the next one that I've got is education funding for a grandchild. Now, an investment bond, there are numerous education bonds that are around that are effectively just investment bonds that have rules wrapped around them, so more rules wrapped around them. So like all legislation, as long as you meet the minimum legislation, it's fine. And then you can add more rules surrounding your one. So an education bond is something that is a derivative of what I've got here. But effectively, it's the same thing where, someone has a granddaughter who's Lily, so there's, she's 8, and the grandmother would like to make sure that she's got some money ready for university at age 18. So there's a 10-year window there. She's chosen an investment bond. She started with $50,000 in it, and each year she tops it up by $5,000 a year. So she doesn't follow the 125%. So she doesn't increase each year, but she doesn't breach it either. So she hasn't reached, she hasn't put in 5,000 one year and then, doubled it to 10,000 the next year. So all within it. The 10-year window stays. Her 50,000 with that 5,000 a year going in is up around that 167,000. Again, that's just from a 7% rate of return. And at the end of it, that money then is available and is able to be paid to the granddaughter so that she can receive some money for education, which is a terrific way to do it and gives a lot of security, I think, around funding a grandchild's education. Now, the last scenario is where I think insurance bonds come into their own, and that's where it comes to estate planning. If you're wanting to provide some money to a particular child or to a particular grandchild, or anyone for that matter, any individual, it becomes very difficult where you say in a will, I would like so-and-so to receive this. Even if you put in your reasons, you can find that somebody else may get their nose out of joint, I suppose, and what do they say? Where there's money, there's a dispute. I think what an investment bond does, it removes the ability for a dispute to arise because it doesn't form part of your will. You don't need to talk about it in your will. You need to let somebody know that the investment bond exists, like your financial advisor. However, it doesn't need to go into your will. So here's an example here with David and Helen. They wanted to make sure that there was some money available to reach the right person. And what they were worried about were two things. They were worried about the money getting to the right people and the money getting to the right people within a particular amount of time. So it's really important to note that with superannuation, it doesn't automatically go to the beneficiaries that you've nominated. So the trustee looks at the beneficiaries that you nominated, goes through a process of making sure that those people are allowed to receive it. In most cases, if the beneficiary has been structured correctly, it should go to them relatively well. But still, you need to be very careful there. It can be challenged. If you've got it in a will, obviously the will can be challenged, and particularly if you've got a certain amount of it. If anybody has requested probate, and banks are very quick at requesting probate, so are investment companies. Probate can take, and I'm sure anyone here attending, if you've gone through the probate process before or been involved in it, you know that it takes time. I have seen it done very quickly, but I'm not confident that it was done very well. Generally speaking, they will take months or more, but there's obviously costs that get involved with that. Now, for David and Helen in this example, they put $150,000 into the investment bond. They nominated very specific beneficiaries. It sits outside of their estate. You bypass the will. There's no need for probate, and nobody was able to challenge it because remember, an investment bond is an investment within an insurance policy. And an insurance policy where you nominate a beneficiary, you're effectively assigning ownership to that beneficiary before you pass away. So it doesn't form part of your estate. It's a very a great way of actually controlling who is going to receive it. So now there is the last paragraph there is a really important one. The beneficiary can receive the proceeds as a lump sum. They can receive the proceeds as a regular tax-free income. And they can also receive the proceeds at a point in time that David and Helen want them to. So, for example, let's say their chosen beneficiary is 5-year-old Johnny, and they would like Johnny to receive the proceeds when Johnny turns age 25. And they would rather not dump a large amount of money into Johnny's lap. They would rather see that Johnny can receive it as an income over a 20-year period. And that's something that can be done. I've worked with some clients recently where they have one child that they would rather not have a large amount of money be deposited into their bank account, only because of some other issues that are going on. And so the way they've structured their investment bond is that when they receive that as a beneficiary, they will receive it as a tax-free income, and it's designed to last about 30 years. So it's a great way of having a little bit of control for those people that could be considered vulnerable. If somebody else is around to take advantage of them, perhaps, this is a way that you can make sure that your assets won't pass or be moved on to somebody that you don't want it to be moved on to. So, and as I've got at the bottom there, anyone with a blended family, a complex estate, or simply a desire for certainty and more control, an investment bond is a great way, a very easy way to find a solution to all of that, and carve a path through all that complexity and just make it straightforward, direct, and easy, and give you the confidence that you're looking for. And so that's everything that I wanted to run over, and I might hand it back to Richard.
Thanks, Nick. Please feel free. I've got a couple of points to discuss, but just feel free if you've got any questions, just drop them in that chat box, and I'll pass those through to Nick. But listening to that presentation, and there's some complexity, Nick, around that 125% rule. How would what would your suggestion be if? And obviously, an investment bond is particularly a useful vehicle for someone that might already be maximising their super contributions or heading towards, the cap on tax-free pension funds. If someone in that situation comes into a large sum of money, possibly an inheritance or a windfall or something like that, and they've already got an investment bond, but last year they might have put in 10,000, and now all of a sudden they've got 150,000. Is there a way to manage that without actually triggering? They might be 8 years into their existing investment bond, and triggering the 10-year rule again is a bit problematic. What's the back door to get around that?
Start a second one. Would be the easiest way. If you can have multiple investment bonds. You don't have to have just one. And in that example, if it was year one in what you just said there, it might actually be easier just to reset the 10 years, because it'll be 11 years in total, and it might not be a big deal. So you'd need to make that decision at the time. Even 8 years, somebody might not be that worried if they already had it in their mind that it was going to be a 20-year investment vehicle, as an example. So there's probably no hard and fast rule, but certainly a simple answer, the way that you said it there, would be just to start a second one.
And there are no limits on how many you have?
No, I don't believe so. Yeah, there's probably just a practical limit. Where you have multiple grandchildren, like many people do, you might as well just have one with multiple beneficiaries on there, and all those beneficiaries can have different amounts and different rules associated with when they get it, etc., etc. So if you have 10 grandchildren, you don't need to have 10 investment bonds. You can just have one investment bond with 10 beneficiaries. But you can change those beneficiaries. You can change the allocation. You retain the control, and you can change it and just make yourself the beneficiary at the end of the day if you want to. So there's a lot of control in these ones, for sure.
Yeah. And one of the strategies we've always endorsed over probably decades now is for people that have significant investments, possibly rental properties or shares in Commonwealth Bank or something they've held for a long time. We've always encouraged them to sell those assets when they're not working and take advantage of a lower marginal tax rate. But one of the things that came out of the budget this year was a floor tax that's going to be applied to capital gains tax. So even if you have no income at all, but you sell $50,000 worth of Commonwealth Bank shares and there's a capital gain there, you'll pay a floor tax no less than 30%. So that's a bit of nasty sting in the fine print of the budget announcements relating to capital gains tax. But an investment bond being taxed at 30% means you can't pay any more than. So individually, we're going to have a floor tax on capital gains tax for investments held outside of super and outside of investment bonds. But with an investment bond, you've actually got a ceiling tax. You can't pay any more than 30%. So it actually makes it quite attractive with those new changes.
Definitely.
We've got a question come through. Thanks, Simon and Trudy. The annual returns generally from an investment bond more than a bank term deposit? ? Great question.
Yeah, that's just purely much like your superannuation accounts, where if it depends on what you're investing in. So if I'm going to say you can have a term deposit inside an investment bond. The investment menus have become quite broad in these, very similar to a modern superannuation fund. So if you had a term deposit, it's probably the same. However, if you're investing in a diversified share fund, then given enough time, definitely. But it all depends on the time frame, and certainly over a 10-year period, I think you would be much more likely to be getting a better return than term deposits through a right kind of investment in an investment bond.
One of the biggest providers in Australia of investment bonds, I think they've got something like 80 investment options on the menu now, and that includes about a dozen different Australian share funds. So obviously, and international share funds, and then mixes of Australian international shares. There's dedicated property options and things like that. So much like superannuation, you get to choose your preferred poison. But you will, have very defensive options, middle of the road options, and then quite aggressive long-term options that would carry the same volatility. Ultimately, there's one Australian share market, and whether it's your super fund or your investment bond, the investment return is going to reflect that market return and that volatility, just with different tax applied on top.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for taking us through that. Hopefully that's provided some good information for everyone. Costs involved with setting up an investment bond. Thanks, Simon. One last question, Simon and Trudy. Thank you. Nick, costs involved with setting up an investment bond?
I'm going to say the short answer would be yes, but they'd be pretty minimal. The main, as a cornerstone client with us, we would generally just be operating that as a part of the work that we're doing. The product costs, they would normally have a little bit of buy costs, but if you had $100,000, it's going to be a couple of $100. It's not going to be a tremendously large amount, those brokerage costs to purchase an investment once you're in there. So they don't have entry fees, they don't have exit fees. It's very, very similar to superannuation. It's a tool, and they make their money out of the ongoing management of it is probably the biggest thing. Yeah.
So like a super fund, they'll charge an administration fee, and then there'll be an investment cost. And the investment cost could be higher or lower, just depending on the options you're choosing. But the administration costs generally are comparable with superannuation. So some ongoing costs, but from that perspective, very comparable to what you're probably paying through superannuation.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, unless we have any final questions, I'm going to thank Nick for taking us through that. If there's something you want to take offline and reach out to either of us or one of the team to have a further conversation about, please don't hesitate, get in contact. As always, love your feedback. If you get an opportunity, just shoot us a quick note, let us know what you thought. And if you have a topic that perhaps we triggered in our discussions tonight, or just something that's come up in your thinking in recent times and you'd love us to cover it, let us know, and we'll put it on the menu, on the agenda, and cover that one for you. But thanks again for joining in, and we appreciate your support. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, everyone.